Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Tales of the Walking Dead finale. Great finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So there was a part of me wondering, because obviously this whole thing's an, I was about to say anthology, and I was curious, would all the stories kind of converge or something? I was wondering if this is going to be something they want to do. It's like, no, it's still its own pocket story. And it's so interesting because these stories are such isolated pocket stories. We don't get the greater context of everything that revolves around them. So we get introduced to Adalia and Eric, which I kept staring. I'm like, why do these two seem so familiar to me? Adalia is played by Daniela Pineda. I hope I'm not butchering her last name, but I was like, why does she seem so familiar? Looked it up. Most recently, she was Faye in the live action Cowboy Bebop. I was like, hey, I probably would have never pieced that together in my head. It's like the purple hair does a lot. Like it just, I would now in retrospect while I was watching the episode after seeing it, I'm like, oh, it's so obvious now, but it's like, man, the purple hair like really threw me off. But either way, she was also apparently in the first season of the originals. I was like, really? I looked up her as her character, and I was like, looking at pictures, like, you seem slightly familiar, but I just don't remember that well. I mean, to be fair, it was like first season, so it's like over, like it's a decade ago, that, you know, but still. And the actor, his name is Danny Ramirez. He plays Eric, and I know him as Torres from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He's the guy that essentially in the comics, his character becomes the next Falcon, and they kind of set that up. I do, looking at his filmography, he's going to be in the next Cap movie, so he'll probably become Falcon, the next Falcon officially in that regard, because they really, like I said, they set that up in that finale. But tangents and all that aside, but I was like, yeah, I was wondering why they look so familiar, but obviously we get introduced to them. They're I thought it was interesting because they're going to find this one particular house and stay there. She only wants to stay a night, and it is this situation of Eric's kind of making it pretty clear. He's like, yeah, but if the person doesn't let us stay, like, kind of will force her hand, kind of. And Adalia doesn't really say anything, just kind of like goes along with it. And I think that in itself right there is kind of a representation of that dynamic and how they view each other, but also how they view themselves. Like, because neither one of them wants to view themselves as the bad guy. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to see themselves as the villain of their own story. Everyone looks at themselves as the hero. Like, so you're never going to really, like, especially in this world, you're never going to see yourself as a bad guy. You're always going to use the justification of, well, we're surviving. You know, whatever like humanity we had to put aside, like we're surviving, so that's all that matters. We justify what we did because it's all about survival. Either way, they show up at the lady's place and they want to stay, but she doesn't want them to stay. It's like, yeah, but you have all of this. It's like, well, it's a give and take, because it's like, right, she wants to keep what she's got. She's like, she almost felt like she knew something more. Even Adalia says it later. It's like, yeah, like it felt like she knew more than what we did. It's like, because you never really find out why she told them, hey, don't stay in this place. Like, maybe she already knew this place was cursed and she was being haunted. But maybe in her own way, she was like trying to save other people, because they had talked about this person they knew. Like, oh, I know about this place because I used to like live in this area or something like that. Which the lady was like, no one lives in this area. It's like, well, I know someone, Maria. She told me. Because we didn't really get into Maria, like how this lady knew Maria and how Maria knew her and why, because they're like, well, Maria didn't make it, but she told us like how we could survive as if we like made it here. But we do know early on in the episode, they were getting away from a walker and they called her Maria. So I'm like, that seemed like that might, you already have your thoughts about, well, that seems like there's an implication there about what happened to Maria, but you know, the episode does kind of imply like what happened, but like I said, it's just so much you don't know, and she has so much. It's like she has running water, she has food. It's like, yeah, but I'll give you some blankets. It's like, that's something, but once again, it's like, no, you have something, you're going to let us stay. Eric, like I said, Eric kind of made it clear, like he was like, yo, I will take this place if we have to. And like I said, Danielle, I'm about to call her by your own name, Daniela. Idalia was kind of like, no, like we will stay like a single night, but I mean, technically they didn't kill her, but I guess Eric like threatening her and just kind of quickly grabbing her like that, like made her have a heart attack. She fell and busted her head and died. So it's like, you didn't directly kill her, kind of indirectly, but it's like, yeah, but we had this place, and he was a lot, and once again, that whole view of like, she was always uncomfortable in the house. He was very comfortable. He was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, we got this place, and he was kind of joking about her being dead. It's like, oh, it worked out for us. It's lucky that she died, huh? Whereas, like, because from the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, this lady's a witch. She's a bruja. It's like, maybe she's a good witch, maybe a bad witch. I can't remember if she was saying, like, there are no bad witches, but she's the type of person that believes in, like, bad juju, like bad energy. So she was already, like, from the very beginning, she was the one kind of getting haunted by this place the most. And I think that's such an interesting thing, making this kind of being like the haunting episode, which is just, once again, the parallels, because I don't remember her character from the originals, but I'm assuming, just having vague memories, was she a witch? Because I feel like season 1 obviously it deals with the Trinity in general, but I feel like the main people they went up against were mainly witches in the first season. So I'm assuming so it's like, it's just an interesting tie-in in that regard. I'm thinking too much about it, but still. It does beg the question, like, you had this bad feeling about this place. You also made it clear you only wanted to stay a single night. So, and then there's also the aspect of, you felt all of this, but you still kind of went along with staying there, because at the end of the day, it's the end of the world. It's a safe place. What Eric said meant a lot of sense of, like, right, no one can hear us here. It's such an isolated place. Like, no one will find us. It also gives us 4 walls to protect ourselves from the environment and from the dead. So let's kind of enjoy it. But she's the one that got the haunting first and foremost. But now remember the point I was also going to make, is that this universe has dabbled in the unexplained. I mean, to be fair, we're talking about the dead coming back to life. So, you know, there's already that suspicion of disbelief that you kind of have to have regardless. But like I said, this universe has dabbled in it a little bit, like there being kind of a more like, I mean, obviously the one I think about is kind of like it's meant to be a parallel to what Rick's quote-unquote final episode was, but Grace's situation where she was in that dream world with her daughter Athena and everything, right? So there is that little element of, there's some supernatural stuff to it. And I'm like, I don't think, there hasn't been many moments, but it has been in this universe of, like, there's some kind of, like, there's something else. I mean, once again, it's, maybe, it also depends on you. Do you believe in, like, energies of the universe, good energy, bad energy, there being kind of karma, like, stuff like that. So, and also, we as humans can be our own destruction. Like, our mind can do a lot, especially if, like, you believe in something and your guilt is right. Like, she feels guilty about this lady in particular. And I think that speaks volumes, that it's like, initially, it's only about this lady, but it seems that they themselves have done stuff. And once again, justifying it to survive. But it is that thing of, it all finally starts catching up to them little by little. Like I said, they're enjoying the place at first, but it really starts affecting Adalia, like, first and foremost. Like, she's the one that's kind of getting haunted most. She's hearing stuff, she's seeing stuff. And it takes a little while, but eventually Eric, it's not until, like, the back half of the episode where it starts really getting to Eric, because Adalia is saying all this stuff and he's thinking she's crazy, and like, oh, you're kind of losing your mind a little bit, kind of get a grip. But then it starts happening to him, like, first with the parrot kind of saying all this stuff. It's like, what did you do? And he was like, that really irked Eric's nerves, and we end up finding out why, because the group that before this, because when we met them, they were kind of like, because Eric does have, like, scars on his face, but we don't know how long he's had those. But when we first met them, it looked like they had been through a scrap or whatever, because, like, Adalia kind of had, like, I don't think it was scratches, it might have just been blood on her face. So, but we saw later on that whatever group they were with or nearby, they ended up killing all of them. But it seemed like they were rushing them, so it was a self-defense thing, but it's also like, it wasn't even just a self-defense, you straight up murdered those people, because we see, like, at one point, Eric is, like, repeatedly pistol whipping someone. But that was, like, after Eric was kind of haunted by Maria, and she's like, "Oh, I'm alive. Like, there's enough in there to share." It's like, "Oh, Adalia did this to me," because Adalia said like, "Oh, her ankle was messed up, and I guess she got eaten, and that's because once again they saw her walker, so it's like, yeah, she died." But he starts being suspicious at the time, and he's like, "That's why that group attacked us, because those were Maria's friends, and they thought you did something. They didn't believe you, so I was just defending you." It's like, so once again, neither one of them is. I mean, the whole point was that this place is turning them against each other, but and especially because like it was so loving at the beginning, but it's like once again like that. This place started turning them against each other. When she was out there, like, swinging her knife initially in the fog and stuff, I was like, oh, God, he's going to walk by and she's going to accidentally cut him. It's like, no, that didn't happen. But, I mean, I guess technically at the end of the episode, it kind of does. Not the swinging, but it's like both of them stabbing each other. But like I said, I'll get to that when we get to it. But they were their own demise. But also, once again, this place is severely screwing with you because you're like, okay, stuff just doesn't, like, once again, the bird saying what the bird's saying, but it's also like, yeah, that's Eric's, like, guilt getting to him. Like, because that's the thing, we are getting such isolated views of people, we don't have full context. Did Adalia actually do something to Maria? They definitely killed that group, and that guilt is there. And I think Adalia, I think, did have guilt about it, because even Eric asked at one point, why didn't you tell me about this place? And she's like, yeah, I just forgot about it. There was a lot going on. It's like, well, maybe she got rid of Maria. Well, because that bit, what? Like, was it supposed to be her backup plan? Like, was on some subconscious level, she didn't really trust being around Eric? Because it's like, when we saw them fighting that group, we mainly focused on what Eric was doing. We saw Adalia in the background, like, fighting too, but it's like, it was mainly about Eric going ballistic on those people. So part of me wondered, was this place supposed to be her backup plan? Like, in case anything ever happened to Eric, like, she'd go off on her own and, like, be here by herself. Because, once again, she made it clear, like, she only wanted to be here a single night because maybe she believed, hey, this lady is an actual bruja. I don't want to mess with that bad juju. But then maybe but once again, Eric wasn't a believer. Even to the point that Adalia picked up a necklace, a cross, and he's like, oh, when did you start believing God? And she's like, now. I wonder how true that is. How much is like, I mean, we're also talking about Mexican households, and I'm sure, like, God is a big part of a lot of Mexican households, because, and I could be mistaken, aren't, like, isn't typically a lot of Mexicans, like, households, like, very, I don't know, like, Catholicism is, like, very rooted in a lot of the, I don't want to go as far as saying like Mexican culture, but I think it's like in a lot of Mexican families tend to be Catholic. But maybe that's me speaking out of pocket. I do apologize, but that was kind of my understanding. I think it's Catholic. I don't think it's Protestant or anything, because there is. I'm not the religious person, so I don't even know like the difference between like a lot of like Christianity, Catholicism, and Protestant. Like, I don't always know the difference because I'm not like the most well versed in religion and stuff like that, yada yada, so on and so forth. But I was wondering, like, if that's maybe somewhere inside of her that was ingrained. Maybe it's part of her childhood. Maybe she lost touch with God. Now being haunted makes you want to, it's like when you kind of done bad, that's when you kind of want to run to God a little bit. It's like, especially when you feel like something evil's coming after you, but it's like, well, do you deserve it because of what you've done? And it's like I said, she was kind of getting at Eric more about what he's done, but he's like, yo, I did everything for you. I was trying to protect you. It's like, you're using each other for a justification for the bad stuff that you've done. And like I said, that was the point of like, it's an isolated story, so we don't have the full context. So it's like, should you be defined by the worst things you've done? I mean, in this world, it speaks volumes about yourself if you're willing to do that, I mean, once again, they didn't kill this lady, but they've killed other people. Potentially, and it's like, yeah, you didn't try to help her. I mean, to be fair, she was having a heart attack. You didn't try to help her. I mean, and she just, not much you probably could have done, but didn't help when you're just standing there and she bashes her head. And it's like, I thought she was dead. And she comes back later on. It's like, well, did she actually come back? Or was that once again all inside your head? It seems like everything was inside their heads, but And Eric kept trying to say, like, no, 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 this is all in your head, Adalia. Like, the fact is that you're now planting seeds in my head. And they started doubting and distrusting each other, even to the point that Adalia was doubling down later on. It's like, you hear me? This is our place now. She's the one that wanted to leave, but now it's like, no, 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 we're going to stay here just to spite you because you're trying to scare us all. And once again, at any point in time, they could have left. Even she threatened, like, oh, I'm going to leave, even if I have to leave by myself. But, like, she doubled down and stated, like, they had an opportunity to leave, but they refused to. I mean, even later on when the lady came back and was, like, using her powers to drag them through the house, he's like, no, you're doing this, Adalia. Like, once again, it was all in their head. Or was it? That's the rub of it. We really don't know. And they were trying to fight off the walkers. But, I mean, it's just a physical manifestation, maybe even just a mental manifestation of their guilt and that, like, hey, at least we're together, we're surviving. They were burying a lot of that. That distrust was already there on some level, but, like, those seeds were already planted. This circumstance just happened to let that grow a lot faster. So, like I said, like, going back to the point of Adalia, why didn't she mention its place to him sooner? But she was saying, like, right, I forgot. But that could also just be like no, I was so caught up in the moment, I completely forgot about this place until we had nowhere else to go. And I was like, oh, I just suddenly remembered. But that just adds more fuel and add more fertilizer to that seed of doubt that's already inside of Eric. They just kept feeding like that in each other, because he's treating her like she's crazy, but she's like, yeah, this place is giving me off some weird energy. I mean, even Eric's got to recognize he was kind of going a little crazy, because he snapped at the bird and he ended up killing it. And then especially that line from Adalia being like, what did you do? And it's like, he just killed the bird after it said that. Because I'm assuming that was supposed to be the bird speaking for those people that had killed, like, after, like, Maria, like, either Adalia said that to him after they ended up killing that entire group, or it's supposed to be like, oh, that group saying that to Adalia after something happened to Maria. Who knows? Like I said, there's so much, it's a snapshot story with such little context. We don't fully know the all sides of things, essentially, when it comes to this. But I was so curious how this was going to play out. I didn't see both of them coming out of this alive. I'd almost wonder if it was going to be a thing of Adalia was going to kill Eric, and then she becomes the next old woman here. Not in the regards of, hey, I'm here and this is my place now, and the next person that comes by, like, that the curse has rooted itself in her, and she might kill the next people. It's almost like the curse passes on from one person to the other. So she now is the old, like, she's the Brudha in this situation. Someone else comes across this place, and the cycle kind of repeats and repeats and repeats. In fact, at one point when she was out there in the fog swinging her knife around, and she sees the lady, and the lady's like, intruder, and she came back inside, I was like, did that lady possess her or something like that? I mean, the moment she died, to be fair, that they also indicated that pretty early on, like, okay, something's going on, because when she died, you see that trail of blood that's on Dahlia's neck start, like, dripping down. So it's kind of like, I think in that moment, supposedly, and you got cursed. So, I mean, she's the one that was washing off and then got the lady's, like, saw visions of the lady's, like, hands around her neck, so. But yeah, they were haunted by every person that they ever killed. She was seeing it, like I said, she saw it at first, but then eventually the madness spread to Eric as well. It ended up with them killing each other. So, even in death, this house is still mine, and now they are there. I guess you can make the argument maybe their souls are trapped there forever. It's like a really depressing way to end. You're kind of like, oh, it's kind of sad, but you're also like, well, we don't know these people that well. Like, I mean, the little glimpse we've gotten of them turns out, oh, you're shitty people, justifying everything you've done. I mean, there's a lot of people who've done shitty things in this world, and should that be held against you? It's like, yes and no, because it's like, you doing that is kind of indicative of you, and it's like indicative of your need to do whatever it takes to survive. And because again, they ain't killed this lady, but they have killed people before, so I don't know. Like I said, it's really hard to judge someone when you don't have their entire life in front of you. But I mean, we humans will make snap judgment. Not like I'm judging anyone who does. It's like, but that's just the way we are. It's like the little we know about your past is all that it takes to define you, and that's, I think, kind of the point. And maybe it's just indicative of like, this is who you are as people, and you're kind of almost this weird match made in heaven, and that's also what made you good yet also terrible for each other. I mean, that's why you fell apart in the first place, because they've been together for a while, but I mean, we don't know how long that was. It couldn't have been that long if this was able to kind of shatter them the way it did. Like, because it was like, right, we've been fighting off the dead for as long as we've been together, was kind of like a line from Eric. So I don't know. It is sad that things kind of played out that way. I had brought this up. It just feels like every episode after episode 2 has just been depressing, you know? I mean, once again, the D episode 3 is kind of in the middle, because it's like, well, we know what that means. It's depressing because we know what that future holds for Lydia and D. So, and what that eventually becomes. So it's that situation. But it's like every other episode is just like, there's been no like, it's just depressing. I guess there's some form of a silver lining to some extent, but it's like 1 and 2 feel like the more like, hey, everything's okay. Like 2 had a little bit of a romp to it, because it's like, hey, we're stuck in a time loop, you know? And episode 1 had a more positive ending, if I remember correctly. To be fair, I had mentioned this previously. I recorded 1, 2, and 3 like almost a year ago, so I might be misremembering, but either way, it just seems like the back half of this season is like uber depressing. I mean, once again, that's kind of the reason why I take so long with The Walking Dead sometimes, because it's just like, man, I want to be depressed? And it's like, once again, this is a depressing finale. I don't know why. I don't know what I really expected. I didn't go into this with any expecting this to be like a happy note ending. Once again, I just wasn't expecting it to be like a cursed situation the way it was, so. Like I said, this is the finale, but I don't know if this is still happening or not, but there are supposed to be more. It's going to be kind of a new series in its own right called More Tales of the Walking Dead. So this is kind of like the end here, but there is kind of like a continuation series in the anthology route in that capacity. I'm curious, would we see any crossover? Probably not. These probably would stay fully isolated episode. Probably wouldn't do, like, I'm super far behind in the whole American Horror Story universe, but I did know like later seasons eventually started connecting all the stories. They were no longer isolated, so I doubt this would go that route, but it'd be interesting to see if they would. Would we? Because Dee's the only character we got an isolated story for that connects to the main plot of like, okay, this is someone we know. These are typically like character. I mean, it also makes sense. It's like this way you don't have to commit to like a, you know, like a full show. You get to be like, oh, I get to do an episode thing. Oh, that's fun. That's cool. I get to be a part of this universe, but I don't have to like fully commit to being in it for a recurring role or even just a little bit unless you want to be type of thing. But you get to dabble in this universe without having to fully commit to it type of thing. So. Because I've talked about it time and time again, I've never been the biggest anthology person. I like being able to follow characters through a narrative. That's why I've always been a fan of like things not being anthologies. I know some people prefer like an anthological story for some things. Like I always go back to it, someone wanting Stranger Things to be an anthology. I'm glad it's not. I'm glad we follow the characters because it means that much more to me. Because I typically don't watch an anthology show because I hate stories just being a one-off because I'm like, oh, these characters or whatever, I want more of their story. You know, so that's always been my complicated feeling with anthologies in that capacity. So, yeah, obviously, like, I'm weird. I'll make exceptions here and there sometimes, and this being one of them. So, but obviously, it's also because, like, right, it's part of that universe, and I already get those main overarching stories in this universe. So, I'm fine with, like, episodical anthology situations when we've already got, like, what? 5, soon to be, I guess, 6 shows in this universe that follow one specific character and story, very specific characters through lines, like as a continuous story, a non-anthology route. You know, either way, those are just kind of my thoughts about it. To everyone involved, this has been kind of a wild experience, and I've enjoyed being able to get these snapshot stories with these different people, different actors from all across the board, and wish everyone involved. I mean, obviously, I'm getting to this like almost a year. No, it's definitely over a year at this point in time of me recording this. Getting to this over a year late and finishing this up, but you know, better late than never, I guess, right? But yeah, wish everyone involved best in their future endeavors, and someone, you know, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm a little drowsy. I'm a little out of it. I apologize. Yeah, like I said, I'm really interested to see where the if the more Tales of the Walking Dead is still a thing, what those stories are going to look like. Like I said, if there's going to be any recurring character, what other familiar actors I might be familiar with that might pop up. You know, what stories will get told? Will they be just as depressing? Will they be just as weird? And I mean, I brought up the time loop episode, but it's like, yeah, that's another thing of like, I mean, that was more heavy science fiction, but still, it's like this episode being a cursed episode, like kind of about a brutal a witch, you know, and curses versus like an episode about a time loop. I don't know why I didn't fully like equate that to it just now, but either way, do we get like weird episodes like that? Because it's like, you're right, they're isolated things. You can kind of do whatever you want with them. So once again, how much of that's inside your head and how much that is real. So that has to be considered. But either way, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.